Welcome back to the Solid Signal podcast for the week of June 17th, 2019. We're all back and looking forward to July 4th, which is just a couple of weeks away. Another great day off for the Solid Signal team to spend with their families. In the meantime, working as hard as we possibly can to make sure that everything is taken care of the way it needs to be taken care of. Well, I was stuck for a topic for this week's podcast until I got hit by the same problem coming from a bunch of different directions, and I thought I would talk about it. The decision I made for the topic of this week's podcast is, should you be doing security upgrades? And I was hit today with 3 of them. One on my computer, which happens all the time. One on my wireless access points, which seemed like it was going to be really important. And then my smart TVs, 2 of them, wanted security updates just today. And I was thinking, wow, I must be pretty insecure to need all this stuff that often. But there's a real question about whether or not you should be doing these kind of things, whether or not it's important, whether or not you should just, only accept the mandatory ones, the ones that just kind of shut your experience down until you do them, or if you should be proactive about it. If you should be the kind of person who's really, getting the jump on this stuff, or if you should just trust that the manufacturers know what they're doing. I don't think there's a wrong answer here. First of all, there are going to be these mandatory showstopper upgrades, which you'll find on your phone or on your computer most often, that just say you can't really go any further until you do this. And you should definitely do those. No question about that. I tend to be the sort of person who does these upgrades almost immediately after they come out. What I do is I wait a couple of hours and do an internet search and see if anybody's having massive problems. And if they're not, then I do the upgrade right then and there. At least I feel better about it, and I know that I've kind of taken control of the situation instead of just kind of letting it go and getting to the point where I have to do it on a time that's not good for me. But it seems like, at least lately, that security upgrades are getting more common, especially for older hardware. Used to be, and this was not a good thing, by the way, used to be that you'd buy something and within 18 months it would fall out of support and it would never get another upgrade, whether it was a smart TV or a router or whatever. But you're seeing more and more upgrades for older and older hardware. There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, what you're finding is that hardware is just lasting longer. It's well built. It's very mature technology. There's no reason to upgrade. And so stuff is just lasting longer. There's a lot more older stuff out there. Second of all, what you're seeing is people do kind of understand that the need for security upgrades are real. There was just an article today that I read, and I kind of repurposed some of this information and went further on it on the Solid Signal blog. You can read this article in that Samsung smart TVs apparently have virus scanning built into them. And I didn't know that, and you probably didn't know that. Nobody knew that. And according to Samsung, maybe you ought to be using it a little bit more often. All of these devices are a lot more complex than they used to be, and they're a lot more prone to malware. And the last thing we want to see is that kind of Armageddon scenario that we all see on that sort of movie or read about in books like Robopocalypse, which is, by the way, a great book. If you've never read it, I would highly recommend it. It's scary and probably pretty accurate as to the way that some of this stuff could really happen. So security upgrades are definitely something you should be doing. And you should be keeping an eye on whether or not you're getting them on a timely basis. And if the device that you think should be getting them isn't, then maybe it's time to be looking at a new device. I recently poked around with a 13-year-old computer running Windows Vista. It was definitely time to retire this computer no matter what. Because, honestly, it was not secure. You were not going to be able to run modern software on it, and the stuff that's on there is really, really vulnerable to all sorts of attacks that have been created in the last 13 years. Whether or not you should upgrade a television, I don't know. But certainly, if it's an older television, it's not getting security updates, if it's a smart television, then I would at least turn off the internet and replace that with a streaming device of some sort, something that can be a little bit more secure. If it was getting security updates on a fairly regular basis, and it's not now, then, like I said, probably time to replace. And needless to say, I'd really appreciate it if you'd consider the great selection over at solidsignal.com. These are the folks who keep the lights on at the Solid Signal podcast. They pay my salary, and I'm really glad that they do. So really, I guess the bottom line is you're going to be hit with these updates over and over again. And some of them, if you can make them automatic, I would make them automatic. But I guess I would err a little bit more on the side of doing them more often instead of not doing them. At some point, you're going to get far enough behind that you're going to not be able to use the device without a security update. I mean, and that's the best case scenario. There's always the possibility that an exploit is found and your device gets infected before that update actually happens. That's kind of a scary thing, and okay, it's not necessarily too terrible, you would think, with some stuff. I guess you wouldn't really worry if your microwave oven didn't get an update on a timely basis. But think about all the things that you have that are connected to your credit card or to your Google account, and believe me, if one of these things were to get kind of hacked, it could be a lot of pain and suffering, especially when you think about Google accounts, which run everything from phones to streaming boxes and even refrigerators. Just imagine, I mean, if somebody got control of your Google account, they could take your phone, they could take your banking. Your Google account is probably, if it's not your primary email, it's probably your backup email for just about everything. And that means that a hacker could take control over your entire life. There may be no way to avoid that if somebody really wants to get your Google account, but at the very least, you can make sure all of your devices are completely up to date and that you can minimize that kind of situation. That's about it for the podcast this week. I wish I could go on longer, but I just got a notification of another security upgrade. Just kidding, folks. Anyway, I'll talk to you some more next week. Thanks for listening.